All right, this is Wednesday, January 28th. This is what we did in class. I didn't make a video ahead of time, but this is kind of the core material that we want you to learn for 4.3. The main questions that we're focusing on are, what are the main organelles in cells, and what functions do they serve? So, as we went over in class, if you were to look in the hood of a car, you'd find an engine and a carburetor and spark plugs and pistons and all sorts of things that I probably shouldn't be talking about because I have very little knowledge of cars. But and on the outside, you could see tires and the body of the car and steering wheel and window glass. Okay, they each serve different functions and they're made out of different materials. The materials in the cells we call macromolecules. So we've been talking about those since the beginning of outcome 4 and actually in outcome 1 as well. So let's see what we could find if we looked under the hood of a cell. Okay, let's take apart the cell one part at a time. And you should be able to follow along in the packet that was handed out. This is a kind of an overwhelming 2-page table with the different organelles and what kind of organisms, so bacteria, plants, or animals. Where do we find them? So go ahead and fill those out as we go along. Oops. Okay, so let's start with the cell membrane. This is the cell membrane is made of lipids, right? Lipids are fats. The cell membrane encapsulates, it surrounds the entire cell, keeps everything together. It is very flexible. Okay, it does hold in the parts of the cell, so there is some structure, but it's also very flexible. Okay, this controls what goes in and out of the cell. So it can keep out bacteria, it can absorb nutrients, it can export proteins, right? Something that's made inside the cell, or protein signal, or other chemicals inside the cell may be sent out for various reasons. Okay, the cell membrane also makes up many of the organelles, and these are the ones that we would call membrane-bound organelles. So things like the mitochondria, or chloroplasts, or lysosomes, or vesicles. These are all surrounded by membranes. Okay, so for example, we did take a look at this video. I'm kind of tempted to just play this again. Yeah, let's just do that. I'm going to mute this. He gives you a little more detail, but basically here we have a bacteria entering the cell. Now the cell goes and moves the phospholipids around it. Okay, the membrane kind of engulfs it, it kind of absorbs it, and this is how it takes it into the cell. So these these lipids are very flexible, so they can move around the bacteria and absorb it into the cell. And once it's in the cell, it might be sent to the garbage heap, or maybe it's something useful and it gets sent to the nucleus or something else. Okay, lots of different things might be absorbed by the cell, liquids or nutrients. Sometimes things like this, you have to have so many in order for this endocytosis, for these vesicles to form inside. Okay. But once all of these are filled up, then the proteins along the side of the membranes, so there are proteins here, and they say, okay, go ahead and make a vesicle. Go ahead and pinch the membrane around itself, and it's also going to seal itself up. Got like bubbles. Okay, we're going to have a bubble lab pretty soon here. Now, how do we get stuff out of the cell? Well, let's say we have some stuff that we made inside the cell, or maybe we don't put this in the cell. This vesicle would be held to the side of the cell and fuse with the membrane, and that's how they release it out. So it's really important that the membrane is made out of lipids, right? And the monomers of lipids are fatty acids. Okay, so that's the cell membrane. Very flexible, very fluid, but holds stuff together. Okay, next organelle we're going to say is the nucleus. Okay, the nucleus is one of those membrane-bound organelles, so it has a membrane around the DNA. And that membrane is specifically called the nucleus. It's made of lipids. Okay, and this organelle holds and protects the DNA. Okay, it is the house of the DNA. It also holds some of the RNA, although the RNA moves from the nucleus and out to the cytoplasm to get to ribosomes as well. We're going to talk about that in a second. But the DNA will stay in the nucleus. The red dots shown here are the nuclei. Okay, these are the nucleus, the nuclei. Okay, the DNA and the chromosomes, the material making up chromosomes are staining red there. Okay. All right, so inside the nucleus is the genetic material, and the double-stranded version is DNA, and that is the full recipe book for all of the proteins you might ever need. Okay. DNA is a nucleic acid. RNA is also a nucleic acid, and these two, the DNA contains all of the recipes for every protein that you might ever need. The RNA is kind of like it's a copy of what the DNA says for just one protein. Okay, so when we make proteins, we make them one at a time, and the instructions for one protein are sent to the ribosome, and the ribosome takes it from there. Okay, so the genetic material is inside the nucleus. All right, here's the ribosome. These ribosomes appear as these little dots here. Okay, they are small little proteins, but we have a ton of them inside our cells. Okay, this is a plant cell. Animal cells, bacteria also have ribosomes. So they are scattered throughout, and they are working full-time because they're always making proteins that we need. Okay, so think of them as the protein factory. They themselves are also proteins. When you're in class, let's see if I can draw on this. Let's see. I don't think that's going to work. Okay. Yeah. Ask me again if you want to see the actual structure of a ribosome, and I will be glad to show you. All right. So if something is kind of faulty, falling apart, let's say a protein has done its job and it's kind of starting to decay or fall apart, or something got damaged, it's going to be sent to the lysosome. Okay, the lysosome is the recycling center. If you are sent to the lysosome, and you're a protein, then you're going to be broken down into amino acids. Okay, the lysosome is also a membrane-bound organelle with digestive enzymes inside that can break down any macromolecule. Okay, if you're a piece of DNA that somehow got stranded out in the cytoplasm, you're out of place. You will probably be sent to the lysosome and be broken down into nucleotides. Okay, same thing with lipids and other carbs that are just not in the right place, or if they're damaged, they go to the lysosome. The lysosome enzymes break them down, and those monomers can be used for something else. Okay, the narrative at BBCHS is that animal cells have lysosomes and plant cells do not. Okay, the internet is in disagreement about this, but this is what we're going to go with. It's not an important thing to argue about. Okay, the vacuole. If you're a plant cell and not an animal cell, your vacuole, which is a large central vacuole, is another membrane-bound organelle, and this is going to serve as your recycling center, okay, in plants. There are digestive enzymes and various nutrients inside the central vacuole in plant cells, but the main thing the more important function that the central vacuole in plant cells serves is that it inflates with water, and that water pressure allows the plants to stand up without bones. Right? We don't have humans and animals have we don't have cell walls, but we do have bone cells that allow us to move and stand up straight. Plant cells do not have these, but they are standing up. They're able to stand up tall with the help of what we call turgor pressure. Okay, turgor pressure is the pressure that develops inside that cell wall because of a fully inflated central vacuole. Okay, when your plant wilts, it's because the vacuole has emptied out. It's used up all the water, has evaporated or whatever, and so it's unable to hold itself up. If you rewater it, okay, if you add water to the roots take up the water, fill up the vacuoles, and you're off to the races again. Okay, you are able to stand up again and do photosynthesis like a pro. Okay, so the vacuole, yep, the large central vacuole is the main one that we focus on in plant cells. Technically, animal cells also have a vacuole, but it's very tiny and it does not serve the same purpose as the large central vacuole in plants. Okay. Kind of confusing, but that's where we are. Okay, the chloroplast. There are two membranes around the chloroplast. Okay, so membranes are kind of a big component here in the cells. And inside, they have a bunch of little thylakoids that also are surrounded by membranes, and you can think of these as like solar panels. Okay, these are the guys. This is the organelle where photosynthesis happens. Okay, so we only find chloroplasts in plant cells. They are green because they contain chlorophyll, and photosynthesis, if you don't remember, is where glucose is made with the sun's energy. Okay, plants do not feed. They don't have to go out and eat. They make their own food. They make their own glucose, whereas we have to take it in through assimilation, right, through eating. Okay, so chloroplasts are a big, very critical organelle in plants. All right, the cell wall is also something that we only find in plants. These are made out of carbohydrates, for example, cellulose. Okay, this is probably the only one that you need to remember. Cellulose kind of forms like a stiff basket, or I use a slinky sometimes in class to demonstrate this. It forms a stiff basket around the cell. It provides the structure for the plant cells with all of that water building up inside the vacuole. The membrane could actually rupture if it didn't have some counter pressure, right? And this counter pressure comes from the cellulose, from the cell wall. Okay, I've heard a lot of students say that the cell wall protects the cell. It kind of gives some support to the membrane, but it is, as a basket, stuff can go across the cell wall all the time. It is not, it's not a brick wall like some people think about. So just make sure that that's clear. Okay, it does not protect the cell from bacteria and viruses. That's the job of the cell membrane. Okay. All right. I think this is our last one. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? This is also a double membrane organelle. We're going to find these in animal cells and plant cells, but not in bacteria. They have another way of converting glucose into ATP. But in animal cells and plant cells, these are the mitochondria. There are two membranes around the mitochondria, and essentially they take glucose from our diet or that we made, right? So in a plant cell, the glucose would just go straight from the chloroplast right into the mitochondria. Either way, the mitochondria function to create ATP. Now, ATP is like the cash currency of energy in our cells. We need ATP to do everything, including APT. So there you have it. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I think that is our last organelle.